Ghosts of Mars is one of those movies that people like to dunk on as bad John Carpenter. And I get it. Now, this movie sits at the very bottom of my Carpenter ranking, but that doesn't mean that I think it's disposable. Here's the thing, it's also Carpenter doing one last siege movie, basically a Western on Mars. Except this time, we're the invaders. The monsters aren't just some random alien. It's the planet fighting back through possession, turning bodies into occupied territory. So today I want to break down what Ghosts of Mars is trying to do. Siege structure, colonization, burnt out Carpenter remix energy. Almost lands, but doesn't quite commit. I am Brandy, otherwise known as the Terrorific Lady, and welcome to Retro Horror School, where we discuss, dissect, and analyze horror from the 1970s through the 2010s. Classes in session. By 2001, John Carpenter is in that late career stretch. You could feel him bouncing around between studio work, genre expectations changing all around him, and the sense that Hollywood isn't exactly meeting him halfway. You've got In the Mouth of Madness in the mid 90s, Village of the Damned, Vampires, and then Ghosts of Mars shows up like one more try, one more siege. And this is early 2000s genre land. You've got audiences coming out of the Scream slasher era, and studios are leaning more digital, more clean, more polished. Meanwhile, you got Carpenter showing up with industrial grit, heavy metal attitude, and a movie that feels like it wants to be a drive-in action horror movie, but on purpose. It didn't do well financially, it got trashed critically, and even now, the consensus among fans is it's so bad it's good, or why does this movie even exist? This still looks and sounds like Carpenter, even though the movie is a little messy. But my question for this video is simple. Is Ghosts of Mars actually Carpenter's final siege western? And if it is, why does it feel so weirdly hollow? Here's the backbone and general plot. We're on a colonized Mars is being terraformed and mined. Mined for what? I don't know. Something. A police unit that's later on led by Lieutenant Melanie Ballard is assigned to pick up and transfer a prisoner that goes by the name Desolation Williams. They're wanting to take him to a remote outpost to stand trial. So they arrive, and the place is basically a ghost town. Bodies, wreckage, creepy metal sculptures made out of what looks like barbed wire and nails, and no clear explanation for any of this other than just the feeling that something has gone horribly wrong. Then the possessed show up, which are humans taken over by Martian forces. And it's then that the movie kind of flips into siege mode. Cops and criminals get forced into the same team, and then they try to make it out alive. And the threat is unstoppable because it keeps spreading and moving into just pretty much whoever it can find. The Western DNA is all over this. Train rolling into a frontier town, law officers bringing in a criminal, the outpost as the last stop before all the dusty chaos. You could strip away all the sci-fi and the Mars setting, and a bunch of this plays like it's a dusty siege western. The siege setup is pretty typical Carpenter too. An isolated location, limited control, enemies surrounding you, and a group that has to work together when normally they would both be on opposite sides of the fence. But where this starts feeling a little off for me is the siege tension. In Carpenter's best siege movie, Assault on Precinct 13, it feels like the walls are closing in. You can feel the tension, you can feel the clock ticking down. Here in Ghosts of Mars, sometimes it plays less like a siege movie and more like a level in a video game. People run from point A to point B. The enemies swarm, there's shooting, there's noise, and I'm not really feeling that sense of just tightening dread or being on the edge of my seat. It's siege structure, yes, but without all the elements coming together. The We're the Invaders angle, this is the most interesting angle in the entire movie, but it's also the angle that feels the most undercooked because this isn't humans discovering a monster on Mars. These are humans occupying Mars. It's mined, it's terraformed. The entire premise is basically we took this place, it's ours, we dug into it, so hey, we assume we own everything on it. And the ghosts, whatever they are exactly, they function like a response. Not just a creature feature threat. It's more like the planet has something dormant inside it. And once that dormant thing wakes up, it uses human bodies as temporary shells. That's a strong idea. Bodies as colonized territory, possession as invasion. The force survives, migrates, and outlasts the individual host. There's even lines that kind of flirt a little bit with this reading. Stuff like, we woke them up, or the idea that they're taking vengeance on anyone that has laid claim to their planet. But my honest issue with that is that the film keeps treating them like freaks and monsters in a way that doesn't fit that political angle. It's there lurking, it's under the surface, but it doesn't become the point. And because it doesn't become the point and it doesn't commit, that angle doesn't hit as hard as it should. I wanted to feel that reversal. I wanted to have the movie sit in that discomfort, but it mostly doesn't. This is where Ghosts of Mars starts feeling like late remix Carpenter energy. Not necessarily in a flattering way, more in a revealing way. The structure of this movie is flashback heavy, but not in a way that adds any kind of mystery. It sometimes kills the momentum. And then you've got the characters in the flashback having their own flashbacks, which is it's a choice. Tonally too, it swings between a serious siege movie, campy one-liners, and full-on metal music video energy. The soundtrack is everywhere. I mean everywhere. It is almost in every single scene. And it's less about using the score to build up tension and keep you kind of and more like it's just constantly trying to hype you up. Which could work if the whole movie was going to be committed to the bit. But Ghosts of Mars feels like sometimes the cast doesn't even know what movie they're in. And when actors don't know whether they're in a grim horror movie or whether they're in one that's intentionally supposed to be campy, the tone starts to wobble just a little bit. It's like Carpenter is playing with his favorite toys: siege, isolation, criminals, a force that spreads, but the pieces don't lock together. Visually, I'll give the movie this. Mars does look isolated. The red dust, harsh lights, the metallic interiors. But there's also, if you know the early 2000s vibe of horror, sometimes in the early 2000s, things felt cheap and overdone, and this movie suffers from that. And the editing and the PowerPoint style slideshow transitions, it makes the movie feel more ridiculous than tense. And for me, and I hate saying this because I'm a huge fan of Carpenter's scores. The score is one of the biggest issues. A score can guide emotion and what you're supposed to be feeling at any one point in time. Here, the constant push of the musical score on you makes it harder to feel dread. It's like the movie's afraid that you're going to get bored unless it keeps blasting this intense music at you. So when I step back and look at the bigger picture, I think that Ghosts of Mars is trying to be a few things at once. It's Carpenter doing one last siege story. People trapped, systems failing, enemies closing in. It's also trying to be a colonization story, waking something up and then getting punished for assuming control. And it's trying to be a loud, over the top action horror throwback. The reason it still matters, even though I don't think it quite works, is that the ingredients tell you what Carpenter can't stop returning to: isolation, collapsing authority, and the fantasy that any structure is strong enough to hold when a world turns hostile. It fails in a very Carpenter way. What's interesting is how this plays out in a post Prey world, a post Indigenous horror wave world, where audiences expect invasion narratives to actually sit with consequences. Ghost of Mars has the bones of We're the Invaders story, but it doesn't push deep enough to make that emotional point. And that's why, for me, it feels like a movie that's almost trying to say something, but then it turns the volume up and drowns out its own thesis. And the most interesting thing about it is what it nearly becomes. I need you in the comments on this one. Do you read the ghosts as Mars fighting back, or are they just cool looking cannibals with metal in their face and no deeper meaning? And if the movie was just told straight and linear, no nested flashbacks, do you think that the siege element could have worked better? Also, where does Ghosts of Mars end up in your Carpenter ranking? Do you think it's underrated camp, or do you place it dead last? If you want more retro school horror breakdowns and analysis, hit like and subscribe, and feel free to share this video with anyone who might be a huge John Carpenter fan. Like me, class is dismissed, everybody, for now, but I will see you next time. Bye.